Evening all. Today we're going to do a quick review of this Kreg Accu-Cut circular saw track system. I got this from Amazon for about $80. There are some things I really like about it, mainly the price, and one or two things I really don't like about it. Firstly, I'm not going to show you the unboxing because this is not an unboxing video. The packaging was a little bit dog-eared, but I'm going to put that down to it being shipped by FedEx. It's easy to put together. This is the end stop piece here, and if I recall, this just clicks home like that. The tracks go together where the arrows point, which just involves putting these rails in. Along with a little package of set screws. Going to do that now real quick. And there we go. So, unlike track saw tracks, this is not designed to be clamped down with some kind of T-slot clamp underneath, although that is T-track under there. You probably could put something together with a T-bolt. Instead, they're expecting this non-slip surface to stop the system from moving, which works reasonably well on something like this. This is particle board and there isn't really much dust on it, but I could see if you had a lot of sawdust on your piece that maybe just pressing down with the saw wouldn't be enough to stop it from moving, especially with vibration from the circular saw. It is pretty solid. I like that it breaks down relatively easily. Obviously looks pretty straight. Definitely lines up nicely with the machined edge of that particle board. So what don't I like? Well, this is the base plate that goes on the circular saw. It is compatible with the rip system, which I also have. This sled that comes with the rip system is not compatible with this. So if you've already got the rip system, you have to actually swap this out and use this one, and this is compatible with both. But the problem, I just lay this down on here, is, and I'll get a close-up of this, but you can probably hear that and maybe even see that. Some people have complained on Amazon in the reviews stating that there's about a 32nd of an inch of play. I would say that's at least a 16th, possibly as much as an 1/8. There is no way that's going to do a nice, straight, accurate cut the way that a much more expensive track saw would. Which for $80, perhaps that's okay. Not entirely keen on Kreg using the term Accu-Cut if it's not going to produce a nice, accurate cut. So let's see if you can see how much this moves on the camera. I'm able to torque the sled back and forth, actually pivot it on the track quite a lot. I don't think that's going to result in a nice, perfectly accurate, perfectly straight cut as you're going down that track. I'll set this up in just a little while on my saw so that we can actually do the cut with it and see what kind of results it produces. One of the things that is important is to actually read the manual. This plastic strip on each side, the blue plastic here, is designed to actually be slightly cut away on the first test cut to calibrate the saw with this sled with the track. Because of course every circular saw is different, and this is designed to be used with your circular saw, not with the circular saw that comes with it, which would be a much more expensive purchase. The Accu-Rip system that I've used by Kreg before is designed to go along the machined edge of a sheet of plywood and rip it, cut it however you want, as long as it's perpendicular to the machined edge. This, I think, is in a similar vein because I wouldn't use the rip system to get an accurate result. I would then take the piece over to my table saw to try and trim it down to the actual dimensions that I want. It would purely be for breaking down large sheet goods into something more manageable. And I think this is the same. And for $80, that's actually pretty great value. If you want a track saw or something that performs like a track saw, buy a track saw. There were track saws on Amazon that were in the sub $200 range. I don't imagine they would necessarily produce perfectly accurate results either. So I think this is a case of you get what you pay for, but we're going to see how this does. Alright, I've attached the skill saw to the sled, and the laser is actually on the skill saw. I'm not sure how well you can see this, but I've calibrated the cutting guide straight down the middle of the two laser lines. And if we look back here, this might be difficult to see on here, but there is just barely, probably a 1/16 of an inch of clearance there between the blade and the aluminum track. So when we first do a cut, this is going to cut into that blue plastic, which is expected. One other thing to note is this circular saw. It's probably the oldest power tool that I own. And if I just pull back the blade guard here, which of course is real smart while it's plugged in. This blade, the arbor actually has about a 1/16, maybe a 32nd actually, of an inch of lateral play. I'm not sure that the saw was like that when it was brand new, but it definitely is like that now. So, between that and a sled that definitely is going to allow for some wiggle room. Like I say, I'm not expecting an incredibly accurate cut from this thing. Well, I've calibrated the saw, and even that didn't work out particularly well. You can see at the very start here, trimming off that guide track also trimmed off a little bit of the aluminum rail, whereas all the way down here at the end, there's a little bit of overlap there. So even that didn't come out straight. I've got the saw track set up alongside a 2-inch wide line. We're going to do a test cut on this 2-foot by 4-foot sheet of particle board. I have made sure to dust off the surface, so we'll see if this stays still and if we get a good clean cut. Well, it did manage a relatively straight, true cut. This was the cut side here, and this is the machined edge here. It's hard to show on camera, but it did a reasonably good job. However, as you can see at the start, which was right here, it jumped off the line slightly. I suspect that's because the initial vibration of turning on the saw caused just a little bit of movement on this allegedly no-slip surface. Now, this was cleaned free of sawdust as much as possible before I started this. And this is a sheet of particle board which has a fairly smooth surface on it. So those non-slip pads on the underside of this had every opportunity to grip properly. And even then, there was just a little bit of movement. Also, more disappointingly, is as well as this slight scrape on the aluminum rail here, after that cut at the very end, the saw blade kind of gouged into the aluminum rail there. And again, that's because this sled just has this unacceptable amount of slop in it. When the saw can do that on the rails, the cut is not going to work out well. And this is kind of unusual to me because I have about a half dozen other tools from Kreg, and with the exception of this one, which really is just a flimsy piece of plastic with some non-slip pads that have a tendency to fall off, all of the rest of them have been solid, well-built, fine tolerance pieces of equipment that I'm very happy with and haven't had any problems with. So this was a little bit surprising from a company like Kreg. So the pros: it was very easy to assemble, relatively easy to calibrate, although, as I said, it kind of cut into the aluminum rails when I was doing that. And obviously it's very inexpensive. I love the fact that this sled that comes with it is compatible with the Kreg Accu-Cut. I think that is a solid move by Kreg. It would be a real pain to have to take this off and put a different sled on every time you wanted to do allegedly straight cuts or rip cuts. The cons, well, it's not very accurate at all. Is this any better than maybe just using a straight edge and moving your saw up alongside of that? Possibly, but I'm not sure if it's worth $80 for that. Is it as accurate as a Festool track saw? No, but it's also a tenth of the price. Is a Festool 10 times more accurate than this? Well, somebody would have to send me a Festool track saw for me to try it out. If there's any volunteers for that, I'd be happy to do that. I don't think that this is 10 times less accurate. I don't know how much calibration and dialing in you'd have to do on a Festool or Triton or some other kind of track saw when you buy them. This is of course going to be hampered by the fact that you're using your own skill saw, and as is the case with mine, there is a little bit of slop in the arbor there, which probably isn't helping matters. Will this be useful for quickly ripping down large sheet goods? Yeah, I think so, and maybe making much more accurate cuts on the table saw afterwards. Would I use this for anything where I really needed accuracy? Absolutely not. The other disappointment in this is these non-slip pads. On a flat, smooth surface like this with the sawdust cleaned off, they still don't grip that well. You see YouTubers using track saws on slabs of walnut and other things that are fresh from a huge bandsaw mill, and there's no way that their surface is going to be smooth enough for something like this to get some good surface area grip on. I don't think this is going to be really useful unless it's used with some kind of clamp. So is this right for you? Well, that's for you to decide. I don't think it was a waste of money, but it is a little bit disappointing, especially with a name like Accu-Cut from a company like Kreg.